Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of The Ranger Room. I'm your host, Cade Kennedy, alongside co host Andrew Santangelo, and this has been a very weird news day. In the last hour, if you have not seen it by now, Clay Helton officially fired as the head coach of USC, and we just have to start with that. This has been a long time coming for some USC fans in their eyes. They've wanted this for a few years. For some people, this was seen as very random. They did not expect this at all. So just kind of give me your thoughts on it, Andrew. I really do not know what to think about this.
Yeah, obviously you're right. In many ways, a lot of fans on the USC side have been calling for it, but from an outside non-USC fan, to me, it comes as kind of random. You obviously have USC come into the season ranked pretty high. They're ranked 14 going into this past week, and I get it. They had that bad loss there at home to Stanford, but again, you figure one loss there, you figured at least have it at the end of the year or whatever, or if not, at least a little more than that. Yeah, again, tough loss, but you could bounce back and still, if your team is as good as that ranking shows, still kind of win the Pac-12 there and at least compete. So to me, it came as random, like you said. A lot of fans seeming as good news for them, but it's unfortunate to see people go like that. And again, to me, it's random, but as a non-USC fan, I guess it could be non-surprising to them.
Yeah, now, like I mentioned a moment ago, I've been kind of searching over USC forums for the past few minutes that I've been here. And I've seen so many people absolutely just filled with joy about this. I've never seen USC fans so happy to fire their coach since, well, the last time they fired a coach. But this has been, I mean, I'm just at a loss for words. I really am. I expected this at the end of the season. I expected this as kind of one of the big, if USC doesn't win 10 games, they probably fire Helton, but all it took was a loss to Stanford, and not only losing to Stanford, but just an ugly loss to Stanford. You're down 42-13 at one point. Not a lot of people probably watched the game, being a 9:30 Central Time kickoff here for us. But it was just kind of weird to see because we expect this from Stanford. This is something they do. It feels like every year they get one big upset win they're not supposed to. It was USC again this year. I kind of expected Stanford to show up for this game and compete a little bit, but I did not expect the backlash to be as immense as it was.
Well, you bring up a good point there at the score, and that makes you kind of wonder. Say USC loses this game 35-33 or 38-35, whatever. Say it's a close game. You kind of wonder, is he still there? Is he still coaching today? Is he still coaching tomorrow? And does he have another game and another shot next weekend? Or is it because it was a blowout or was this, if you lose this game, you're done? And you never know. We also don't know, was there stuff going on behind the scenes, behind the doors in the locker room? That would probably never come out. But again, this is random to me. So to me, it would almost seem interesting to see what kind of goes on there in those meetings. And maybe it's, he gets called in today and maybe they don't have a good conversation today, and that's what leads to it. Maybe they went into the meeting not expecting that. So you never really know what goes all on that kind of side of things. But I do wonder if it was a 38-35 game or somewhere close, is he still coaching?
You really make a good point to that because, I was just looking through and then it was a lot of famous USC people. Even Lionheart came out for it. So many famous USC alums just, we need to get this guy gone. We absolutely have to get him out of here. Like I said, I think getting rid of him was the right move. I just don't think it was the right move this week.
Exactly, and that's, to me, if you fire a guy like that within 2 games, that means that's a conversation that's been going on since the end of last year. Like, it to me, just 2 games really make a difference. Like, if you were already on that side of things with the staff, why didn't you make that move at the end of last year and let whoever comes in as the new coach take over, start his program fresh, start the season fresh? I feel like that's just more right for the players in general. Was like, if this is where they were at and that's how close they were, why did, like, what like, my question is, like, what changed in these 2 games that did you not see in the past?
I really don't know. Like I said, this is just so sudden. This is just one of those things, to me at least, where it was. I understand you had a bad loss to Stanford, and also, as Mike and Perkins points out in our chat, this is the same Stanford team that got absolutely shut down by K-State. I mean,
Yeah.
this is so score one for the Big 12 there. Not to not to jump already to other topics here, but I mean, it was just reading that today about an hour ago, and it was just I saw so many USC fans celebrating like we're free, we're finally gonna do the right thing. That's not guaranteed at all. I mean, I've already seen the Urban Meyer rumor mill starting up again for what feels like the 80th time in the last 5 years. Urban Meyer's gonna get thrown into the mix again. I've already seen people trying to, if you've seen the meme of the guy with like 18 different pinpoints on a map trying to figure it out. I've already seen people doing that, trying to pinpoint how we're going to get this coach or this coach but I mean, it's just one of those things that if you're USC, like you said, you have 10 games left.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go on through a season knowing okay, it's that cutthroat. It's game 3. It's week 3 of the season. And we're having to do an entire new thing now. We got to get this coach in now. We got to get Dante Williams. I mean, he's your guy now. I've heard he's pretty well respected in the locker room. Good recruiter, knows the LA area well. Very respected in the high school coaching circuit. But I don't know how much that's going to help USC at this point.
No, I mean, at this point, it's a tough move. Yeah, like you said, he's respecting the locker room. He'll take over. But, again, the confusing part and random part to me is if it's 2 games in, you knew it was on the ropes there. Nothing really changes within 2 games. You know his coaching strategy still. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, the Pac-12, who we kind of ripped on last week, has a phenomenal weekend this past weekend.
Yeah.
So it's a weird conference where, I mean, USC doesn't have it easy. I mean, there's going to be a lot of tough games that come up on that schedule and everything. So I'll be interested to see how well they do with the new coach and stuff. But it's gonna be a tough road the rest of the way for USC.
And then just kind of get into looking at USC. Their next game is, this Saturday at Washington State. That's never an easy place to win at in the Pac-12, especially. I mean, now granted, Washington State did lose to Utah State, so I don't know how good the Cougars are this year. But I mean, this game has gone from something I probably wouldn't have even brought up this week to must-watch TV almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially you want to know how this team responds to the coaching move. Obviously, it can either deflate players or it can get them more motivated to kind of get out there and show up more.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the absolute bombshell of the day. And this hides another thing I wanted to talk about today was Texas. They're not back.
No.
They're not back at all. A moment of silence to people who actually thought Steve Sarkisian was going to make them go undefeated because he was a great offensive mind or something. I still don't know why people brought that up. Shout out to them, I guess, but
well, they're back every year, aren't they?
Well, they're back. They are. If you've ever heard of Schrodinger's cat, a science experiment where a guy put a cat in a box and the cat is simultaneously there and not there at the same time, that is Texas. They are simultaneously back but not back at the same time until they are proven back. I mean, it is just going to be one of those very weird things that every year, oh, look, here comes Texas, and then they stumble to an opponent, whether it be Maryland, whether it be Cal, whether it be BYU, going all the way back to 2013 even, whether it be Arkansas now to add to the list. I mean, when is Texas going to be back, and how do you even fix a program like that? Speaking of programs changing.
Well, they won't be back anytime soon because if they can't handle Arkansas, when they make that move to the SEC, how in the world are they going to handle the likes of Alabama, Georgia, LSU? And I can keep going if you want me to. I mean, but nothing against Arkansas, but, like, if you're not beating Arkansas there in the SEC game, wasn't Texas home in that game too? Or was that Arkansas?
No, this game was at Fayetteville, and I'll get into that in a moment.
So then that's a little better, but still, you got to be able to handle that game. And, again, when you get into the likes of those real powerhouses of the SEC in football, what's Texas going to do?
Well, Texas announced what they're going to do. Hudson Card no longer the starter.
Yeah,
Casey Thompson is now the starter.
pretty quick change for that.
Yeah, that was he had 2 good drives against Arkansas. Casey Thompson did it to make it not a 30-point blowout and instead only a 20-point blowout. So they're going to go with him now. You get Rice this week, thankfully for them. I mean, Rice kind of played Arkansas closer than Texas did, so I don't know how that's going to work, but that'll be the Longhorn Network game of the year they get. So they will be hoping to have a good first game for Thompson, but man, I mean, he showed off his talent in the Alamo Bowl against Colorado, but I really don't know what is up with Texas. I really don't. I mean, every year this feels like this happens, but this just feels kind of different. I've never seen them have to change quarterbacks. Ellinger, to give credit to Sam Ellinger, he was always consistent. It was never just like, oh, the quarterback's the problem. I've never seen that one. That's a new one for Texas.
Well, I think in the past, too, I think it's credit to a lot of other Big 12 schools. I think a lot of them kind of caught up to Texas when Texas staying on that next pedestal and like keeping the momentum there. I think a lot of other schools, I mean, you look at TCU, I can't remember who the quarterback was, but a few years ago.
Oh, yeah, the Trevon Boykin and Kenny Hill.
A few years ago when they really took off and had their phenomenal years. You obviously had Baylor take off and had a really good year last season. So I think these schools have kind of caught up to them in recruiting. And if you think about it, obviously, I don't know the campuses. I mean, I don't know the campuses left and right, but you look at the sports programs. I mean, listen, there's not a big difference between Texas and some of those other Big 12 schools that are in Texas, like Baylor. I mean, look at their basketball team going on to win a national championship, having a phenomenal year in basketball. I mean, it's the Big 12 teams have caught up to Texas now, and that's where Texas has to find a way to get over that. And now they're moving to the SEC, who, I mean, yeah, we're both Big 12 guys, but we'd both probably agree the SEC is a lot tougher. So here, when other schools have caught up to Texas, they're about to make themselves have a lot tougher road there to get back to where they were.
I'm sure Alabama is waiting for the first time they get Texas in Tuscaloosa. I'm sure they will be absolutely thrilled about that. But speaking to that point that you brought up, I think that just kind of goes with what I like to call the nationalization of college football. And this goes for Texas and USC, I think, because recruiting is so much different than it was even 10, 20 years ago. You see Ohio State, Oklahoma, Alabama be able to go into Los Angeles, go into Dallas, into Houston, just kind of pick whoever they want out of that pile. It's not like back in the olden days when Texas got to kind of have the monopoly on Texas recruits and split them with Oklahoma and A&M and maybe LSU on some years and Arkansas. And USC got to have all the talent in the world from California. I mean, you can kind of really just pick and choose whatever you want to do now.
Well, the technology and social media has gotten so good now where, I mean, you could basically have just as good a visit sitting at your house as you can almost being on the campus. I mean, it's become that real. I mean, you look at the way some of these schools have the virtual tours and everything and all that, and it's crazy where it is now. That's a great way to put it. These schools have caught up their recruiting as well.
Exactly. And I think the next problem for Texas and this is something that I don't think will ever get fixed until it happens. It's one of those weird things, but there are a lot of boosters that like to act like they're in charge of the University of Texas football program. And I think that was a problem we saw under Charlie Strong. That's a problem we saw definitely under Tom Herman. And I think we even saw it at the end of Mac Brown's career after the national championship game. I think this is something we're going to see so much of at Texas forever. And USC, I hope it doesn't get out there. Well, let me rephrase that. As an OU fan, I'm perfectly fine with USC being down as long as they want to be. If they want to not be relevant for 30 years, go for it. But if you're USC, you're thinking, okay, we listen to the fans. Finally, for some of them who've been calling for this for 3 years, that's a good start. But now you got to go out and make an amazing hire. And I mean, this applies to Texas too, because Texas didn't really make the best hires in the world. If you're USC, you're in very much danger of falling into this same trap, so you need to be ready.
No, yeah, absolutely. And that's that's a lot of these programs. I mean, you look at a lot of schools that used to be up at the top are now kind of falling apart a little bit, and I think it is sometimes as outsiders do have too much control, and I think you see it in professional sports as well, where you kind of have these owners and GMs and all that, and now with schools, whatever position it is, you kind of have them listening to the fans a lot, and they're trying to almost please the fans more than just do what's best for the team.
Exactly. Now, that finally brings me into week 2 of the college football season.
Crazy week.
Absolutely fantastic week of football. I mean, there were just so many good games on. And I mean, I think the main one you have to talk about is Oregon going into the shoe and beating Ohio State. I mean, I didn't expect this at all. I'm going to be completely honest. I saw no Thibodeau. You lose your. I mean, Oregon's out their best 2 defensive
Yes.
players. I'm just thinking this is going to be a fun game, but Ohio State's winning this one easily. And I mean, Oregon gets all the credit in the world here. They shut Ohio State down. They were able to take advantage of that not so great defense the Buckeyes have. And I mean, they got the win. And not only did they get the win, the first home loss for Ohio State since 2017. And in true fashion, someone left a rubber duck at the middle of the field.
I saw that.
That was a nice little touch. I guess that's just a tradition now. If you win at Ohio State, you have
Yeah,
to
you
put
gotta do
something
something.
at the O. But just kind of give me your thoughts about that game. I mean, just such a fun game to start the day.
Yeah, it was crazy. Honestly, we sat here talking last week and about this game, previewing it and stuff, and I think we both said really that Ohio State would win this game, but I think the spread when we were doing the show was like 15.5, 16 points. We both thought that was a lot. So I thought Oregon would cover in that sense, but to come out, find a way to win this game, and really, to me, the score was almost closer than what the game really was. Like Ohio State kind of came back a little bit there. I mean, this was what I think a 2 touchdown game for a lot of that second half, and Ohio State had that touchdown late, or not late, but they had that touchdown to kind of come back into it, and then they get the stop, and they have a chance at the end. But I was I was shocked by this result, and yeah, the 28 points is kind of high, but I was surprised how well Oregon's defense was kind of able to stay in control there for a little bit. And I know you look at the stats, Ohio State, they finished with like 500 yards or whatever, but in reality, Oregon's defense helped control that game and let the offense take over there and kind of maintain control there. So I was very impressed with the way Oregon came out there and was able to find a way to win that game. And I was laughing because after we talked about how bad of a week it was for the Pac-12, they come out and get a win over a top 5 team in the nation.
They did exactly what we said they needed to do. You kind of had to put all your eggs in the basket of Oregon, and they absolutely delivered. Like you said, this did not feel like a one-possession game. Do not let that score fool you. Oregon takes a 14-7 lead at halftime, I want to say.
And
then they scored the minute and a half into the second half, it felt like. Oh, just a big run by Verdell. And it was one of those just kind of moments where it finally hit me like, Oregon's going to win this game. Oregon is absolutely here to win this game. They are not messing around today. And I mean, just a fantastic win by the Ducks. That's really all you can say. I'm still in shock about that game.
Absolutely. It was 28-14 going into the fourth quarter.
Exactly.
And how about this? I mean, look at the box score. Look at how many different receivers Oregon uses in this game. How many different players just have one catch? Like nobody goes off. Their highest receiver was 34 yards for a touchdown. But I kid you not, they got one. They got 10 different guys with a catch here in that game.
God.
It's wild because their highest guy had 3 catches for 34 yards. Talk about many different weapons. That's incredible.
I mean, Oregon looks very dangerous. They really do.
And get this, the guy with 3 catches was the running back that ran for 161 yards.
Exactly. When your best receiver is also your running back, usually that spells a bad day, but for Oregon, it really, like you just said, it really didn't matter.
No.
They could do whatever they wanted to Ohio State, and Ohio State really was just kind of running in circles, it felt like at times, just trying not to beat themselves, but Oregon just absolutely dominated.
So where does this put Ohio State in your mind? Does this say anything about them, or do you think they still have pretty good control of that Big Ten? Do you think this is kind of a awakening? Kind of you see some flaws where this could open up some things in that Big Ten, but
I
obviously, what you got closest rank to them would be Iowa and then Penn State. I think those two. So I guess
yeah.
really, do Iowa and Penn State have real shots at knocking off the Big Ten championship throne there?
I looked at this and I saw two major flaws with Ohio State. And this is very weird to see with them, but they remind me a lot of 2018 Oklahoma. They really do. They have an outstanding offense. They really do, with C.J. Stroud being able to just throw the ball. He threw for 484 yards. I mean, he can absolutely throw the ball, but man, they have to fix that defense. They really do. It felt like at times I was watching Mike Stoops out there on defense. There were a few times where it'd be 3rd and 5, and you'd have guys 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. I'm just thinking, what are you doing? Then they would do exactly that. They'd throw a little 5-yard route, get the first down, move right down the field. Or they'd run the ball or something like that. They'd find a way, because Ohio State, it felt like, was just kind of, okay, you want to drive down the field? We're not going to stop you. We're going to absolutely let it happen. But the other thing I think is, that being said about Stroud, he's still very inexperienced. And that showed in this game. He had a few costly mistakes. And sometimes you say costly mistakes, and it's like, oh, a turnover that. It can be as simple as a ball that should have been caught that he overthrew or underthrew. Just kind of, some situations he hasn't seen yet.
No, without question. That just goes on with some growing pains. And that's why it's kind of big for them to have a game like this at a conference where he gets that kind of experience in a big-time game before you get into that Big Ten conference play. Because, again, the conference schedule isn't going to be easy. So, for him to get that experience – it's huge, because you're obviously going to have to go up with the likes of Penn State, Iowa, Michigan. So that's where it's going to really play a factor there. And we'll see what happens down the road for him.
And I think another big game that absolutely needs to be talked about. Talk about growing pains. Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Man, they've got a lot to learn in the next few weeks. You lose your starting quarterback in the first quarter. I saw today. He will not be back until mid-October. You're not getting King back until mid-October, which is going to be absolutely brutal for the Aggies. But the good news for them, at least, was you have the defense. The defense showed up. It absolutely had to against Colorado. Granted, Colorado's not, world beaters or anything. No. But the fact that you were able to pretty much prevent them from doing anything after their first 2 drives of the game really showed A&M's got a lot to learn. They got a lot to learn fast.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see where they go. Like you said, the defense seems to be there, but how well is that defense going to hold up against teams like, and I don't know what teams they play from the SEC from their outside division, but if you're going to go up against the likes of Georgia and Alabama, how is those defenses going to hold up there against teams like that where they have an offense along with the defense? Obviously, like you said, you survive a Colorado team there, even with losing your quarterback. But the question is not even the defense, though, is how well is that offense going to do? Because obviously it's not easy to go with a backup quarterback. So
especially, with Calzada, you could definitely tell the first few drives watching him. He did not look ready.
No, not at all.
Not at all. There was absolutely where it kind of, for me at least, I was like, okay, if you're Colorado, you get 1 or 2 more scores, you win this game. A&M's not going to score more than 14.
Exactly. And what was it, 7-3 at halftime, I believe?
Yeah, Colorado was just able to kind of just put it on cruise control despite it being a 1-possession game until the 4th quarter.
Exactly. And it was 7-3 going into the 4th. And it was an interesting road there. And, again, I was kind of hoping Colorado pulls that off. And, yeah, even though you lose your quarter, that's still been a great win for the Pac-12. And and even that, I mean, it shows a lot, too, about Colorado as a team. They struggled on offense there, but the defense was still able to pick them up. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see what happens on their side. But you're right. Texas A&M, for a team that comes in high ranking-wise, and they were supposed to have a lot of hope around them, that's tough. That's tough to lose a quarterback like that. We'll see how they bounce back. Let's see who they got next week. But it's going to be it's a tough road for them, and we'll see. They got New Mexico next week, so I'd still
Yeah.
expect them to survive that.
Yeah, they
But
get
then
New Mexico, but then
the
the
following
following
week
week
is Arkansas.
yeah, here comes Arkansas.
And we'll see if Arkansas is legit or is that new 20 ranking next to that name. That's just big time after you get that big win this past week. So we'll really get a test for that number 20 mark there for Arkansas and see if that's a good spot for them.
We really will. And speaking of knee-jerk reactions, Notre Dame playing Toledo. This was a game that was on Peacock, and no one expected this one to be how it turned out. I mean, Toledo has the lead. 2 minutes left in the game. Under 2 minutes even. Toledo has a lead, and it takes Notre Dame getting some traditional luck of the Irish, you could say.
Yeah.
The few penalties I saw there where it was just kind of like,
Questionable.
I was like, I don't know if it's holding if the guy stands there and then the receiver falls down. I don't know about that one, but, I mean, Notre Dame still had some amazing catches to get down the field anyway. But that was one of those games where how really good is Notre Dame? Because the other game we'll get to in a little bit, they didn't look good against Florida State. Florida State, as we'll talk about, they've got some issues to deal with there. And now here you are struggling against Toledo at home. How are you going to fare? You get Cincinnati in a few weeks. You get big time games. I cannot say big time apparently today. I don't know what's the problem.
I'll tell you what, you said Notre Dame has Cincinnati in a few weeks?
Yes.
That's going to be a fun game to watch. Cincinnati, they're not an easy team to walk by. I mean, honestly, if you throw Notre Dame against them in one of these first 2 weeks, I wouldn't be surprised if Cincinnati would have pulled it off. I mean, we'll see if Notre Dame's able to fix their issues, but listen, Notre Dame they're in a lot of trouble. I mean, like we said, they struggled last week in the opening week where they let Florida State back in the game, send it into overtime. And then this week, I mean, there's not one point you thought, okay, well, that game, maybe the beginning of the game, when you thought, okay, Notre Dame's going to pull away because you expect them to. But really, throughout that whole game, Toledo was within a single possession, I think, the entire game.
I think so, yeah.
There was not once where it was like, okay, Notre Dame's going to pull away this game. And then Toledo, took the lead? That touchdown came right before that 2-minute mark, right?
Right.
So, yeah, they take the lead late like that. And, I mean, luckily, again, you're going against a lower team there in Division 1, so you get lucky there in that sense and you're able to drive down the field, but you give up that touchdown, you're going up against a better team. You're not going to march down the field like that.
But I think it was also, for me at least, seeing Toledo march down the field. Obviously, I was very excited to see them doing it, but at the same time, I was kind of thinking in the back of my head, slow down.
Exactly.
You guys have to slow down because I know this Notre Dame team, and I know every Notre Dame team is going to play like this one. You give them a minute 30 to go down the field, they will absolutely go right back down the field at home.
Way
especially.
Too long. Way too
It
long.
feels like every year Notre Dame gets one of these games where they look terrible the entire game. They get pinned finally. It looks like they're finally going to lose, and then by some miracle, it feels like they remember how to have a 30-second drive. It feels like. Go right down the field, take the lead. And that's exactly what happened again.
Yeah, with that question, that's just the way Notre Dame plays. I mean, I feel like they do that in every sport. Like in basketball, too, you see them play a lot of closer games. But we'll see how they bounce back. I mean, they have a good coach there. I expect them to start to figure things out. And even though they're not physically in the ACC, they'll get matched up with a lot of ACC teams. I don't know. I forget if they have Clemson this year, but that could be another fun game there. But listen, obviously they want to make the top 4. You already have an Oregon team who just beat that really good Ohio State team and obviously anything can happen, but theoretically, on paper, should take care of the rest of that Pac-12. So you're looking at Oregon probably stealing a spot there from Notre Dame in the top 4. Yeah, obviously, like the way these 2 games went for Notre Dame, when you look back at that, it's good. It's gonna hurt them. I know it's jumping the gun. It's only week 2.
It's only week 2, but I mean, it absolutely is going to hurt them in the long run. And I mean, that's if they survive, because you have Wisconsin and Cincinnati to deal with in the next few weeks. Neither of those games are going to be easy at all. But speaking of not being easy, Iowa and Iowa State, a game that is really never easy if you're Iowa State. And I mean, the Hawkeyes did what I expected them to do. It was a defensive battle, it was a slugfest. It felt like whoever punted better was going to win the game, as it always feels when I watch any Iowa game sometimes. But I mean, they get the win. Iowa looked great defensively. Just kind of give me your reaction to this game. This was highly touted top 10 matchup, and Iowa getting a big win, big resume win.
Yeah, this is huge for Iowa, especially knowing what they got coming up. But like you, I thought this would be a defensive game, and Iowa did what they had to do. I mean, if Iowa was going to win this game, they needed to control the game through their defense. And if Iowa State was going to win this game, they would have had to turn it into a little bit more of an offensive game. And that's where you had Iowa. Iowa made Iowa State play Iowa's game, and that obviously hurt them a lot. We talked about the Cyclones' struggles in the opening week against Northern Iowa and how that would fare into it, and I think you did see a little bit of that. Iowa State's not right now on offense. I mean, they finished that game and only put up, what was it, 10 points, I think, or
Iowa
17,
State did
17,
get 17,
17.
but it was a late touchdown
Yeah.
with their backup quarterback in Brock Purdy getting benched
Yeah.
for throwing 3 interceptions.
Exactly. And so they did get that late touchdown. I forgot about that late one. And I think it goes to show, what they only put, it was 16-10 to Northern Iowa, if I remember correctly.
It was.
So really, you're only putting up 33 points, and you talk about the benching, so you're really only putting up 26 points there with your starting quarterback, who is supposed to be the top-notch next-level player, which we haven't seen so far this year. So to me, this game puts a scare on Iowa State, in my opinion, because, again, you're going to go up against not the best conference, but you're still going to go up against the likes of Oklahoma. I know we were talking about Texas, but there's still Texas, and some other teams in that Big 12, and it's not going to be easy. And I'm interested to see where Iowa State falls, but this game by Iowa, able to put up the 27 points, able to have the defense control it, this shows a lot about Iowa, and I think they're going to be really competing for that Big Ten title. I want to say they're in the opposite division from Ohio State, so
They
really,
are. Iowa being in the West.
yeah, they can control that West side, get into that Big Ten championship game. You might be seeing them possibly, if they're able to find a way to knock off Ohio State or something, Ohio State or Penn State, whoever comes out of that other side. This shows a lot. Iowa, 2 good wins, a blowout win over Indiana, and then this top 10 win over Iowa State. It says a lot about Iowa right now.
It really does. They do have, easily, in my opinion, one of the better defensive units in the country. I mean, I really would love to see a Georgia-Iowa game because I really think that would be first to 2 wins. It feels like if those two got together. But Iowa, to me, is a team that I did not expect to be as good as they are. I really didn't. I expect them to be good, as most Iowa teams are. They're always a very solid football team, always seem to be in the mix in the Big Ten West, but they have impressed me a lot in these first 2 weeks, and they get Penn State in only a few weeks. Penn State comes to Kinnick.
Well, we talked about their defense last week because I think in the Indiana game, they definitely had 2 interceptions for touchdowns.
Yeah, they had 2 picks.
So they're getting a lot of points there from their defense as well. And, yeah, Iowa's going to be fun. And, hey, Penn State's schedule, too, is going to be fun. They already beat Wisconsin. They got Auburn this upcoming week. And then you mentioned the Iowa game. So, listen, college football's back. That's the best way to say it.
That is the best way to
It's only week 3.
And as we all know, the best part about college football, random upsets.
Yes.
We got 2 of them in the top 15. We've already covered both of these teams. We'll go through them real quick again. Stanford beating USC 42-28. I'm glad I stayed up late to watch this one. I did not think I'd be watching the end of the Clay Helton era in this game. But, Stanford switching quarterbacks up, coming in. Who knows what Stanford's going to do? They're very unpredictable when they do this, but they absolutely looked fantastic. They really did.
Yeah, and that was a surprising outcome to see because, you already talked about it once on the show today. You had Kansas State basically do everything better than Stanford did, almost double-wise. Like, that game was all Kansas State. And to see Stanford come back, and what an answer. And what does that show about your coach? Like, what a great response to the coaches and whatever the coaches did to get them right. That was one of the more surprising performances of the week for me, just because of what we saw against Kansas State, and then to see it turn that quick. Like, that turned in 1 week. and not even to play it at home, to go on the road and have that kind of performance was incredible for Stanford. So a lot of credit to Stanford and that coaching staff, because to me that shows a lot about the kind of unity in there, the togetherness they have, and like just a tremendous bounce back as for that team as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those games where I wasn't really sold on USC before this game, but they're now in turmoil, so they might become a threat at the end of the year. We might see them as a big factor with the Pac-12 South. Who knows how that's going to go? We'll get to Utah in a minute, but I really do not know how to. This Pac-12 South confuses me a lot. UCLA had one big win over LSU, and now all of a sudden they're the front runner. All it took was everyone falling down around them in the Pac-12 South.
That's all it takes, one win, and everyone kind of jumps on board and hopes for the best. But that whole Pac-12 in general is just confusing because there really isn't ever, at least in recent history, there's no standout team. Like 1 week it looks like this team, the next week it looks like that team, and that's something the Pac-12 continues to miss every year. Is there's no front runner, and I mean right now obviously after that win it looks like Oregon, but yeah, it's just a confusing conference that really never makes sense, no matter what year it is.
And then Texas going to Arkansas. This was an absolutely fantastic environment in Fayetteville. It really was. You had the Stripe the Stadium going on. This place was rowdy. They were loud. They were ready for Texas to be here. A lot of pent-up frustration just in general. They do not like the University of Texas there in Fayetteville, and it showed. And I mean, Arkansas just played an absolutely fantastic game. They were able to do something very simple, very effectively. They were able to just pound the ball the entire game. I believe they had over 300 rushing yards on Texas. They made Texas's offensive line look very bad. They made Hudson Card look very uncomfortable. I mean, this was just a perfect storm for Arkansas. And give all the credit to their defense. Their defense played a phenomenal game. And, of course, their offense did as well. That's why they got 40.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's, again, like I mentioned, the Iowa game, Arkansas made Texas play. Arkansas controlled that game. You mentioned the rushing. That's what they did. They controlled it throughout the game just because of what they were able to do on the ground, keep possession of the ball, keep that momentum on their side, and it really never gave Texas a chance there to kind of take it back. It was always it seemed like Arkansas's momentum in Arkansas's favor. So I think, again, this showed a lot, and that was, like you said, a tremendous atmosphere for Arkansas. And going forward, I think it says a lot about them. Again, we'll see what it means for them going forward. Gives them the confidence. I mean, I think it's still Alabama, Georgia's kind of out of their reach, but we'll see where they're able to finish in terms of where they're at in the conference. I mean, that was a tremendous win, a tremendous start for Arkansas in that game, and hopefully that gives them the confidence to do damage in the SEC.
I mean, Sam Pittman he's doing an absolutely great job. This is only year 2 for him at Arkansas, and I mean, he's already got them looking like they're on the right track. You get a big win over Texas. If they beat Texas A&M in Arlington, there will be some serious talk about, hey, this might be Arkansas's year to win the West. It really could be if you knock A&M out of the way. Yeah. If you could somehow shut down Alabama, which I'm going to say this right now, Arkansas played Alabama better than anyone else last year. They're going to be a threat to win the West. I'm not saying they are, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, if someone can find a way to stop Bryce Young in that division, it would be Arkansas.
Without question, I feel like Arkansas has been on the uprise in a lot of different sports. Whatever they got going on there right now has been good. I feel like basketball the last few years has been on the uprise, and we've seen better basketball from them over here in the recent years. So whatever they're doing over there, they need to continue to do that.
They're making some absolutely great hires.
Absolutely.
I'll say that.
But I'm with you. If they're able to find a way to knock off A&M and get things going there, then yeah, you're looking at them being the front runner probably in that West.
Yeah, or at least a front runner.
Well, because
with the front runner would be Alabama. That is kind of my mistake getting my words mixed up here. But
is Alabama in the West?
Alabama is in the West.
Okay, I mixed that up then. Never mind.
Yeah. I forgot Alabama existed. They're too good for everyone. They're on a higher plane than everyone, it feels like. So I just kind of forgot they existed for a moment.
I retract my statement.
they'll be
I was
a front runner.
I was thinking Arkansas was on the other side of
yeah,
that division.
it's coming down to who's going to win Bama Arkansas. I really think it will. But speaking of more upsets, Utah comes into Provo and loses to BYU. I mean, this was another really fun, weird night game. Utah gets their first win over. I mean, BYU gets their first win over Utah since 2009. This was just such another very fun atmosphere in Provo. BYU just did enough to win. I mean, they made Charlie Brewer look not so great. They really shut Utah down most of the game. BYU, not really known for their defense, but they absolutely proved it.
Yeah, no, without question. I think it goes to show all these different games we've started to talk about. Like, it's crazy where we're at in college football and all the different upsets, and it really shows that you're not able to kind of take any game lately.
No.
Like, and I think that's what the crazy part is. And there's a couple ones I want to kind of get into, not into, but just like briefly mention that it almost was an upset, but it wasn't just because they were that close. Obviously, we talked about Notre Dame, but and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But it's crazy, especially from a team like that, and that continues to show about the conference, about how you really don't know what you're going to get out of each team each week.
I mean, that's absolutely true. This has the feel to be one of those really weird years. Not saying 2007 level weird. I don't think Kansas is going to be number 2 anytime soon, or South Florida. But, I mean, this kind of has the makings of we've seen 2 teams we expected to be in playoff contenders drop their big game. Not many people expected. Some said, yeah, Georgia will beat Clemson. Some people thought that one would happen. But very few had Oregon over Ohio State. So kind of the question might be, who's next to fall? Who's going to be that next team to take a hit? And, I mean, that's the beauty of this sport, is waiting to see who's going to be the next one.
We'll pick. We'll see. We'll look at week 3 and see what team we think's most likely to get upset there.
Speaking of another team that really has just stumbled out of the gate is Miami.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, Miami barely surviving, 25-23, barely defeating the Mountaineers from Appalachian State. I mean, this was another one of those games that, you know, I knew App State would play them close. They like playing these big games. They love being competitive in them. They're always, it feels like, competitive. But this was one of those where it's like, how good is Miami really? Because we knew they were going to lose to Alabama. Everyone knew that one was happening. But really, how good is Miami?
I think it's still tough to call. I don't think we really know yet. I think, again, Alabama's Alabama. I think this kind of shows where Alabama's at as well, because I think this is one of those after-game effects kind of thing, is where you went up against that powerhouse, you're still a little banged up from them. And I think that did play a factor in this game a little bit as well. I mean, I think it's kind of what we've seen from in these last years in the NFL, before these last couple of years, but the Patriots. I mean, it was always, you play them that one week. If you play them tough or whatever, even if you just don't play them tough, you get beat bad, it kind of carries over into that next week just because how banged up some guys are from playing some bigger people. And I think that had a little bit to do with it. I just do think it still shows how many different flaws in Miami. And, I mean, I forget what they dropped to in the rankings this week, but I think they're down to like 23 now already after starting the year in that top 15. But I think this does show a little bit where Miami's at. I think there's a lot of concern there because, I mean, luckily they're in the ACC, so they're not going up against SEC teams every week. But, I mean, you're still looking at, you'll play Clemson, but outside of that, I think Miami still can control a lot of these other ACC teams you see there, especially we've seen North Carolina struggle there out of the gate against Virginia Tech in week 1. So I think Miami will still be fine by the end of the year in terms of still competing for that ACC crown. But I think if you're a Miami Florida fan, I think you're very concerned. That's without question.
Yeah, without question. I think this is going to be one of those. The ACC really is in a weird place. The ACC kind of taking a few beatings these last few weeks.
Yeah, for what we talked about the Pac-12 and what kind of shape they were in after week 1, and their bounce back in week 2 we talked about ACC struggles out of the gate. Well, they didn't really make up for it this week.
No, their answer was to nearly lose to App State. And I mean, North Carolina played Georgia State this week.
Yeah,
That went about how you'd expect. Arizona State had also a pretty solid win over UNLV. Not really a whole lot to take away from that game, but I mean, the fact it wasn't a close game is always good to see if you're a Sun Devil fan.
No, yeah, without question. I mean, I guess Virginia beats a Big Ten team, but not really a powerhouse
Yeah,
Big Ten.
Illinois kind of they got their one win and then they're kind of dipping out.
Exactly.
They beat Nebraska. They did exactly what they needed to do. But another weird game, kind of the next thing I want to talk about. We talked about the Pac-12 and ACC a little bit. What in the world is going on in the Big 12? I mean, there were some absolute weird games last week. First one I want to get to, Oklahoma State again, just kind of getting by, beating Tulsa 28-23. This was one of those games that kind of had the feeling of, oh no, what's going to happen? What is happening? Spencer Sanders, what are you doing? Oh no, we fumbled the ball. Okay, very lucky Tulsa decided to recover it out of bounds, but
Oklahoma State's got a lot to figure out. I mean, you're going up against Boise State team at their place this week.
oh yeah.
Never an easy team, so I think Oklahoma State's on a lookout this week here with what's to come up here this weekend. But in terms of last game, I mean, again, I think a lot of stuff carried over from week one. Really, this offense can't figure anything out right now, and I get it. It's not easy playing with two different quarterbacks in 2 weeks. But both those guys had played time in 2020, so to me, it's not much of an excuse, really, because they both saw time. It's not like you went under a coaching change. Both those guys saw time under the same head coach, the same offensive coordinator. I get it, you lost some weapons offensively, but still, like, some of these mistakes are just fundamental mistakes, it looks like, too. And really, it's the passing game and the running game. I mean, I think the defense looks fine. I'm not worried about the defense at all. But I think offense has a lot of work to do this upcoming week, and we'll see what happens going into a game at Boise State, and then you get into conference play. So Oklahoma State, I don't know what they got to change in terms of the rest of this year, but I think their stuff from the offensive line, from the quarterback, running. I mean, actually, who was it? I forget. Who ended up having the run? Cause they used somebody. I think Spencer Sanders led him in rushing, but the one touchdown run, I don't know if you saw it, but it was a phenomenal run. He was able to bounce in and out of different tackles. So
Oh yeah.
it was a good game in that sense, but overall there's a lot to work on.
I mean, this kind of felt like last year's OSU Tulsa game where it was like, okay, OSU, you were Tulsa was one or two mistakes away from winning that game, you know. You recover a fumble properly, or you don't let someone run a kickoff back on.
Nah.
You know, you're a few plays away from pulling that out. Now, if you're Oklahoma State, you're probably thinking, well, a win is a win, but it's the second week of a row of a win is a win is a win.
Second week in a row against teams you should be beating anyway. I mean, you haven't covered the spread in the two games so far this year, and yeah, I get it. I think a lot of people think Tulsa's a little better than advertised, but again, we talked about in-state rivalries last week, and you have that again this week, so it is an interesting case there in arguments, but and they're two teams that play each other pretty much every year, so they do know each other left and right. But I mean, still, I think this was I don't think there's. I don't know if you believe in moral wins, but if there was one, this is almost one for Tulsa because they were leading the majority of that game, and like you said, if it's not for a kick return touchdown, this outcome could be different.
Exactly. Now, some other games I kind of want to get into in the Big 12. Kansas State, once again, getting absolutely hammered by the injury bug. Skylar Thompson goes down. A very tough game with Southern Illinois. Now, I did hear that they hope for Thompson to be back sometime later this year.
I saw that.
They don't know when. I haven't seen an exact timetable for that yet, but I mean, an absolute shock to Kansas State's season. On a season where they looked like they were off to a very good start. You beat Stanford. You got a big quality win there. And, I mean, just to see it already, it's week 2 and your season's practically in jeopardy now.
Yeah, luckily for them, I think they said Howard's going to be the starter now. I think he's got decent amount of playing time there at Kansas State. I want to say I remember watching him before in these past years. And so, again, obviously, I'm not saying he's going to be as good as a starter is, but I think they do have some control there with a guy who's played before. I think he might be able to keep him afloat for a while, and we'll see where they're kind of at in this upcoming weeks. I don't know who they're going to open with in the Big 12.
I believe
think it's Oklahoma State.
I believe
actually.
it is Oklahoma State. That might actually be that might be what we call a rock fight. That might be one of those first to 10 wins that game.
Right, exactly. And so we'll see what kind of happens here with Kansas State this upcoming week. I don't know if you know who they got in week 3, but listen, there's a lot you have to look forward to or have a lot to look at here in week 3 as Kansas State kind of goes up against some of those.
Yeah, Kansas State gets Nevada this week, by the way, at home.
So obviously that's a game you still should be able to take care of, but outside of that, I think it's a game you need to learn a lot about who your quarterback is, who your team is, and kind of get them on the same page. It's a good game to kind of figure things out here before you jump into conference play. So, like you said, you had a big win against Stanford. Obviously, Stanford being USC makes that win look that much more impressive. But I think, assuming you take care of business on the defensive end and everywhere else, I think you have to learn a lot about your team here and learn a lot about that quarterback coming in a game like this before you jump into conference play like that.
Exactly. And then the one final game from the Big 12 I want to touch on, Texas Tech escaping with a win at home against Stephen F. Austin. This was a game, once again, not a lot of people saw this. This was on ESPN+. But Stephen F. Austin, they're down 6. They have the ball at the Texas Tech 5. It took a goal line stand from Texas Tech, something we don't say very often. It took a goal line stand for them to once again barely defeat an FCS team. And they looked very good against Houston last week. They looked very solid, especially in the second half. But I don't know what it is with Texas Tech and not being able to put away teams you should be able to beat. They had trouble with Kansas these last few years. I mean, I really don't know what is going on with Texas Tech.
I think it's something we mentioned last week. I think a lot of teams, a lot of schools are trying to take other schools lately. I think that kind of goes to show, again, I think that's part why we have a lot of these upsets here in college football happening a lot, left and right. A lot more than, I think this is a lot more upsets, or at least a lot more close games than we had 10 years ago. Like, I felt like 10 years ago it was kind of like, okay, well, especially in football, okay, this team's better than that team. You kind of have that all chalk wins. But now I think you're having a lot of teams kind of figure things out, and I think you have some people take some lately. Some you kind of just depends on the start. Like if you get off to a good start, you get the momentum, you get the confidence, and listen, schools like Stephen F. Austin and other kind of lower schools like that in terms of against Tech, the likes of Texas Tech, you have nothing to lose in those games. Like you're not the one with all the pressure. You're not the one. Everyone's counting you out. You're the ones that get to play with a free line there and kind of just do whatever you want and find ways. You get to have fun with the trick plays. You get to have fun with all that because you really got nothing to lose. You mentioned like the FCS or whatever. Like, listen, in the end, you lose that game, that really doesn't do a whole lot to your schedule. Like, you're going to go back to the FCS teams that following week or whatever. You're going to get into those conference games in that sense. So, really, that loss for Stephen F. Austin doesn't do a whole lot. Really, you still get to build that confidence and momentum where you get to say, we just played the FBS team, a powerhouse, or not power, but like a great team in a Power 5 conference is what I meant to say, where you get to take that out of there and come away with that kind of moral victory.
Exactly, and I think this kind of perfectly leads into our final game I want to talk about. I don't really want to talk about Michigan and Washington because, well, I wasn't expecting a lot from Washington after losing to Montana, another FCS team. And Michigan did kind of exactly what I thought they would. I mean, they won the game and barely threw at all. I mean, they did not throw the ball a whole lot. They just kind of kept running the ball. I mean, it was classic Big Ten football, I guess you could say. And Michigan had a pretty easy win. But Jacksonville State defeating Florida State. Florida State's first ever loss to an FCS school. And they were 3 points away from sending it to double overtime with Notre Dame. I mean, that just really goes to show every week is different. It really is. And I mean, if you're Florida State, how do you recover from this? I mean, You go from almost the is Florida State back moment to the worst loss in school history.
It's incredible, and especially the way it happened. That last second play there, you had a great move by the receiver to kind of get open after the catch, and it looked like he was going to be tackled, and the time was going to run out, and you survived the victory.
Yeah.
But no, instead he makes that move, runs in the end zone, and wins the game for him. It's incredible win there for Jacksonville State. Incredible move there, and I think they planted a flag there at the end. I think I
They
saw that
did.
video,
I saw
so
that. Yeah.
thought that was funny, but it's it's an incredible statement win for them and their program, and listen, that's tough for Florida State. Like you said, to go there and play a big time Notre Dame team, barely lose, then you turn around and do that. So it changes each week, like you said, and we'll see what happens. But it's tough to bounce back from a loss like that. That's for sure.
It really is, and I think that kind of, I did not think, going back to firings and all that. If you would have told me a coach was getting fired today, I would have expected it to be Mike Norvell. I would have fully expected Florida State to go full dumpster fire mode again and be like, okay, it's time to burn everything to the ground. We lost to an FCS team. That kind of feels like what has been happening there ever since Jimbo Fisher left. And I mean, everyone thought they were so close to crawling back out of the cellar, and now they've just fallen right back to the bottom.
Yeah, again, I think, especially in college football, it's not like the NFL where you have all these NFL guys and you're able to kind of overcome coaches. I think coaches getting fired is a big thing for programs mid-season, and just so tough to kind of overcome. So that's why I don't think you'll see that mid-season unless it gets bad and they're like 0 for 5 or 0 and 5 or something like that. But I think I also think it's a little early because the Jimbo Fisher, was that 2 years ago?
That was, I want to say 3 or 4.
It's been that long. Has it been 4 already?
Well, we did have the Willie Taggart experiment in Florida State, if you remember that.
Oh, yeah, I did forget about that. Okay, so
that was an interesting year, too.
So I think it's just a little quick there for that kind of coaching change. So
I agree. I'm just saying I could see that happening with how they, like I said, it's another one of those schools they want results, and they want results immediately, and you have to give coaches time. Now, sometimes you give them too much time, and you get stale and mediocre, but I mean, you have to know when is the time, and that's something that I think a lot of programs don't do anymore. Is we have to get, if we're not winning 10 games the first year you're here, you're already on the hot seat. But taking a look here at the AP Top 25 that came out on Sunday, are there any really surprises to you, or is it kind of how you think it would be after some of the craziness we've had this week?
Not necessarily. I guess the biggest surprise for me is some of the jump ups. I never really understand how sometimes they punish teams more than others, and sometimes they benefit. Like I get the final score, I think ended up being a 20-point game, but Coastal Carolina I think rose 3 spots, and I mean for the most part they struggled in that Kansas game. I don't know if you watched any of that on Friday night, but Kansas was playing them close the majority of that game, so I was surprised to see a little bit of a jump there from Coastal Carolina just because of the way Kansas played them. But I think that was tough. And then Virginia Tech jumping 4 spots after a win over Middle Tennessee. I don't know. Middle Tennessee isn't a team like North Carolina where you beat and jumped up that much. So it's kind of always funny and interesting to see the way they do some of those jump ups. You look at Ole Miss. I mean, they jump up 3 spots for a win over
Austin P, an FCS
too
team.
Too far away for me to read. But again, it's interesting to see kind of the way some of these things shake out. And then you had Ohio State drop 6 spots for losing to an Oregon team who isn't a bad team. So it's like, how do they pick some of that? Is always, I get they vote on it. So to me, I always wonder what goes in some of their heads each week, that how you back some of that stuff up in terms of where you go. And then you have Cincinnati drop after a 35-point win, and they drop a spot. How does that happen? That's the things. So nothing too alarming for me, just more confusion in some sense, I guess is the best way to put it.
Well, I mean, I think you see this a lot where it's not really them moving up, it's more everything around them imploded in front of them, so they
Yeah.
just kind of get the benefit of the doubt. Like Virginia Tech, you mentioned, you really get the benefit that both USC and Texas lost, so you get to keep kind of just slithering your way up the
That's
polls.
true.
But of course, that can lead to, I think it was one year where there was some team, I can't remember which one, that started like 25, and week 2 or 3, they were all of a sudden 12, just because so many teams in the middle lost, and then they got beat by, a Sun Belt team or something, and it was just like, oh, you mean they weren't really that good? It was like, no, they had no business being up there. I don't know why they were there.
Well, then, how about the punishment to Notre Dame? Like, I kind of agree with that one. You almost blow the game against Florida State, and then you only beat Toledo.
I really think they should be a bit lower to me. I don't think Notre Dame's a top 15 team right now. When you look at their body of work, you barely beat a Florida State. I think this is more of a Florida State losing than it is Toledo, because we've seen Notre Dame stay right where they are after some of these bad games. But I think it's just kind of looking at their body of work so far, and not to act like playoff committee talk. It's only week 3, but I really don't know how good of a team Notre Dame is, and I'm a little surprised Oklahoma stayed at 3. I really expected a full swing of Oregon to 3. Now, obviously, Oklahoma winning 76-0. If you drop Oklahoma for losing by you drop Oklahoma for winning by 76, that would be insane to me.
And I think your point about Notre Dame, I think they stay in the top 15 more because of who's behind them. I think
so.
You have a UCLA team who wasn't even ranked at the beginning of the year, falls 13. Yeah, obviously they beat LSU, but how good's the LSU team this year?
Not very good.
Yeah, exactly. So then you have an Iowa State team who struggled against Northern Iowa, and then honestly didn't look good against struggled against Northern Iowa, and then didn't look good against an Iowa team. So that's kind of where you fall there. So, and they have a Virginia Tech team again who wasn't ranked in the beginning of the year, had a good win against North Carolina, excuse me, and kind of moved on from there. So I think again, it's not necessarily Notre Dame is a top 15 team. I think it's more who's behind them. I would say a team you could argue would be Wisconsin. I get they lost, but they lost to a good Penn State team here early on, and then they bounced back with a win. Again, and then you look at Ole Miss too. Is the team like no one expected to be up there that quick? So we'll see kind of where everyone falls, and even after that, you have Arkansas. So again, another team that just had a really good win this week, so that's why they make that jump. But no, yeah. So your top 4 right now, you're probably looking at Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Oregon, and we'll see kind of where it falls there. But how about no Big Ten team in the top 4? I mean, that's kind of surprising. You're used to seeing Ohio State up there and everything.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. A top 5 without Ohio State or Clemson.
Exactly. Top 5, no Big Ten, no ACC. There, as you get 2 SEC.
You get Iowa. Iowa being the Big
top 5,
Ten,
yeah,
being the Big
4.
Ten representative, being Iowa. It's been a long time since we've heard that one. Since I believe 2015, when it was them and Michigan State, and we got that really fun Big Ten title game. I mean, it's good to see Iowa back. I mean, they're kind of the most out there team, it feels like.
And honestly, I know I'm jumping the gun here, but previewing next week's rankings, I'm interested to see. I don't know who Ohio State. They have Tulsa, so
I mean, Tulsa. I'm not saying Tulsa's going to do anything, but look out for them. They might make that a little bit more competitive than you'd expect.
Yeah, absolutely. And could you see Ohio State falling back a spot? Let's say Ohio State beats Tulsa by, let's say 10 points, and then you have Penn State beat Auburn by let's say 15 points.
Yeah.
Could you see you could almost see a Penn State jump there. You could really be looking at next week when we're on our show next week. You could have Ohio State maybe be the 3rd ranked Big Ten team.
Yeah,
I really think that's a possibility.
Or let's throw an even crazier scenario out here. What if Cincinnati beats Indiana? You see New Mexico kind of hangs with Texas A&M a little bit longer than you'd think.
Yeah.
You see Penn State and Cincy both jump into the top 8 then.
That would be crazy.
I mean, there's so many possibilities for just random combinations here, but after kind of running through the top 25 a bit, we've already mentioned them. Some that kind of stand out to me, Arizona State, the big jump up to 19, really getting the benefit of the doubt. I'm not really sold on them yet. I mean, they get BYU this week, so I guess we'll find out rather quickly. BYU also welcome back to the top 25. You get Arizona State as your kind of welcome back gift. You already beat one Pac-12 team. Go beat you already beat two. Go beat a third one.
Exactly.
On their way to trying to beat half the Pac-12 South in 3 weeks.
I do think some of the rankings do have to play in your next opponent, so I think they do kind of rank those for a bigger matchup this week.
I absolutely agree.
And I think that does help. So now you got that 19-23 matchup here this upcoming week. But there's some good games this week. They really are. And again, I will throw out here, I think my upset to watch team, if you're going off ranking wise, is Virginia Tech traveling to Morgantown against West Virginia. I think that we could be talking about as being one of the upsets this upcoming week.
I have a few kind of sneaky picks now that we're finally getting in here. One game I want to talk about, and I'm just saying this in terms of pure statistics, not what we think will happen, just kind of something to make you think about it. I'm sensing a pattern. Clemson was the number 3 team in the country. They lost to Georgia. Ohio State was the number 3 team in the country. They lost to Oregon. They were both also the home team for that game. Now you have number 3 Oklahoma, who is also the home team playing Nebraska. I'm not saying Nebraska's winning that game, but Oklahoma, this is your opportunity to break a very weird-looking pattern to start the year.
Hey, without question, let's just say if Oklahoma
were to lose this game, there's absolutely a curse of number 3 going on. I'm stating that right now.
And a very bad look for the Big 12. Let's just say that.
Oh yeah, the Big 12 would be absolutely.
I don't think the Big 12 Big 12 cannot afford a Oklahoma loss to Nebraska.
Oh, absolutely not. But a loss that could very well happen. Cincinnati heads to Indiana. This is a huge game for Indiana. I mean, you get shut down by Iowa. This is your chance to redeem themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if the Hoosiers made some noise in this game. I'm not saying they win. I think Cincinnati is the better team, but don't be surprised.
No, yeah, I absolutely. I wonder. Let's see what. I'm curious what the line on this game would be, just in terms of where they're at. And I mean,
Cincinnati's a 3.5-point favorite for this game.
I think that shows a lot too. And even the matchup predictor, 45% towards Indiana. I think that says a lot too. So I think obviously that shows we're with you. I agree with that as well. As that could be a noisemaker game. I think obviously I already mentioned the Virginia Tech West Virginia game. That could be an alarming game in a lot of different ways. We talked about Miami's struggle. Michigan State could technically get a road win against a ranked team.
I think that's one of those what I like to call technical upsets, where Michigan State might be the better team. Miami is a 6.5-point.
So how about this? So
I like Michigan State in that one, honestly.
Especially against the spread.
Yeah, I think that might be my upset pick of the week if we're talking any upset. In my opinion, Michigan State might be the better team in that one. They're just not ranked yet.
Yeah, no, without question. Can we agree on what the game of the week probably is there at 2:30?
Oh yeah, obviously it's Purdue Notre Dame at 2:30 Eastern. No, I'm just joking with you. Alabama and Florida. I mean, it's going to be such a fun game in the swamp. I mean, that's how you know college football is truly back. That first time you hear the SEC on CBS jingle and you get greeted to it, I mean, it's going to be a blast.
Yeah, and I think that this could be a lot of noise making too. I mean, it's funny to see Alabama just shows how good Alabama's still 15.5-point favorites against them. I really do think though. Listen, I'll take Alabama in the game.
Yeah,
but I will take Florida against that line.
Really?
I think, like you said, it's the first time you're gonna get the SEC game. Listen, I think Alabama beat Miami. Was it 14 or?
Alabama?
No, it was 20. It was 20 plus. Yeah,
it was
26.
It was a blowout city there.
I think that first SEC game you're gonna have some problems. I think you can have a little slow offensive game there and some defense early on. But yeah, I like Florida there on the spread.
And then another kind of interesting one to me, not a ranked game by any means, but how does Florida State rebound at Wake Forest at 2:30 on ESPN?
Where's that?
This will be in Winston-Salem. Wake will be the
take Wake.
You might want to take Wake in that one. I could see them winning. I mean, they have a history of pulling these weird ones off. I
Yeah,
mean,
didn't Wake play Clemson close a few years ago? Or am I thinking
I
of Georgia Tech?
I don't know. Both those teams do it. Wake will absolutely have, their once every 10 years game,
Yeah.
it feels like, where here comes a team that's maybe not as good as they should be, but still a big name, and then Wake will absolutely just wake up for that one, I guess you could say. But another one, Big 12 play getting started, Baylor, Kansas. I'm just excited to see how Kansas does in that game with Lance Leopold. He got them up for Coastal Carolina. I want to see how he does in his first conference game. That will be a storyline for me that's kind of interesting just to think about. Like how does Kansas react with a coach that looks pretty good for him so far? Granted, it's only been 2 games, but
I said they played Coastal Carolina close. I think they'll have him. I mean, I'm not picking Kansas in the game, but I think it'll be a noisemaker game. I think it could be one of those close games, for a lot of it. But then you get those couple late touchdowns for Baylor to make it look like a blowout. That makes sense. Like I think you can have one of the almost like the Coastal Carolina game this week, where that was
it was a
one possession
game.
Yeah, it was a one possession game in the second half. But then in the end, Coastal Carolina does the damage, and I think it was 49-22 or something like that in the end. So it looks like it was a blowout, but that game was closer than it was.
And then, if you want offenses, the game to go to of the day though might just be Mississippi State at Memphis. Memphis coming off a 55-50 win over Arkansas State. Mississippi State, it's a Mike Leach team. You know what you're going to get from those teams. If you love points, that might just be one to watch.
Yeah, no question. I think that will be a big-time game there.
I mean, an over-under is 63. I think that should be a little bit higher, personally.
There you go. Take the over.
Yeah, hammer the over on that one. Don't actually take gambling advice from me. That's probably a terrible idea. But, hey, if you want to, go right ahead.
There you go for it. But it's, no, I think looking at this, there's a lot of other good games this week, and obviously there'll be that surprising game. But we still haven't even talked about the Arizona State Boise or BYU game. That'll be another good one there.
We haven't even gotten to Auburn Penn State, which that's the game day game. That's Saturday night football.
Probably be a whiteout
game.
A whiteout in that stadium. That game's gonna be interesting because that game could go both ways in terms of Penn State's able to score when they want to, and they're also able to play defense.
Yeah.
So it's like, which game is Penn State going to try to play against that Auburn team? Because really, I think if you expect Auburn, you probably Auburn's another weird team though, because
Auburn is a team where you just kind of flip a coin, and depending on how that year goes, how that coin's flipped, that's the year they're going to have. So they're either going to go 7-5 or 10-2.
This game to me really could either be a 42-35 along those lines, or this game could be like the week 1 Penn State game.
Or it could be 10-3.
16-10. Yeah, like this is going to be a weird one. Either way, I'm going to take Penn State in this. I think Penn State takes care of business. But I am interested to see whether this game turns into a lot of scoring or if this game stays in that defense mode.
Yeah, I'm not going to make a prediction on that one yet. That'll be during the Thursday night show for me and Connor. But another one I think you need to keep an eye on, at least as an OU fan, I will be keeping an eye on. Tulane goes to Ole Miss. This is going to be one of those weird games, I think. How good is Tulane? Was it just a fluke that they played Oklahoma this tough? Was it just Oklahoma having a bad day? Or are they legitimate? This will be kind of that we'll figure it out game. I believe last time I checked the spread, the over-under is 74. And Ole Miss is a 14-point favorite. So they're expecting a lot of points in that one. And then Stanford and Vanderbilt, a battle of academics. Vanderbilt, they'll probably play an academic game afterwards. They'll probably do some academic bowl or something. I mean, that'll be just kind of seeing how Stanford looks after the upset win will be interesting. Iowa State taking a late night trip out to Vegas, a 9:40 or 9:30 kickoff will be very interesting to see how Iowa State does in that one. I think that should be a win for them, but you never know.
That time can mess with them.
It really could. You're used to the game being halfway over or 3/4 of the way over, not starting by then. And then Fresno State at 9:45. They nearly beat Oregon. They go to the Rose Bowl to get UCLA. Could they pull the upset there? That might be
Yeah,
that might be one of those games where you look at that and not think much about it. But I mean, hey, Fresno nearly beat the number 4 team in the country. Can they beat number 13?
that's true. We'll see what Fresno's got there. Um, it's great. It's crazy. And then again, we talk about the Pac-12, how weird it is. We talk about college football, how each week's different. Each team's different each week. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. Then Oklahoma State at Boise State, 8 o'clock there. That will be. I think that's going to be a very tough test for Oklahoma State.
What's the line on that one? I'm interested. I'd be surprised if OSU's favored, to be honest.
Really? Let's see here. Boise is the 4.5-point favorite at home.
Yeah, and just the way OSU's played the first 2 weeks, that's why I would have been surprised. And even the money line on that's pretty like that. That's higher than I expected for that one.
Yeah.
But even the matchup predictor there had 66% towards Boise State. So to me, that's insane. Like that's crazy. Where like if you would have asked me that question last year, you'd figure. I mean, I'm not saying OSU favorite, but that much of a difference is alarming to me, and that kind of shows where Oklahoma State was these first 2 weeks. But when we talked about it, they got stuff to figure out, and Boise State's no easy team. So
yeah, they have a lot to figure out on the offensive side. That's going to be one of those deals where, what in the world do you do? How do you fix this? Obviously, you got to run the ball more, but run the ball better, not more. Don't run it more if you're only getting a yard.
yeah,
But
you gotta do a lot better. Pass, throw the ball.
I was surprised that for Spencer Sanders being a dual threat, not a lot of QB running with him. It was really weird to me to be like, you have a guy who can run. Why not
I
use
think
that?
it's a little bit also because he holds the ball a lot, so a lot of plays almost break down a little bit because of how long he holds the ball, and he's scrambling anyway. So while they're not, I don't think they're able to draw up as many quarterback runs as you'd expect because of that. Like in the end, he this shows where the rest of the run game's at, but he led the team in rushing yards on Saturday, and he had that one big run, and you already met that on the play, he fumbled and got lucky. I mean, I think that was had to be a little over 20 yards, I think, on that run.
Yeah.
So a lot of that came from one play, but yeah, no, I'm with you. But I think it's just a lot on how much he gets hit around already throughout the game, I think, and you're not able to do. Because, listen, we've seen a lot of quarterback stuff with Oklahoma State in the past, and this is one of your more dual threat kind of guys, and you don't use it nearly as much as you used to.
Exactly. Now that we've pretty much given a preview and review of what's all happened in college football, now it's finally time to take a little trip over to the NFL because we've had some absolutely great games this weekend. We have a potential for a good one tonight in only, 25 minutes. Baltimore at Las Vegas, Monday Night Football. But, I mean, some of these games were absolutely fascinating. I mean, first game of the year, Dallas nearly takes down Tampa Bay.
I honestly think that was the game of the week, to be honest. You had teams going back and forth. You had Dallas take the late lead, and then you had Tampa Bay drive down and get the game-winning field goal. So I think that was arguably the number one game of the season. The first game of the season was arguably the game of the week. Well, I obviously got one more here, as you mentioned tonight, but I think that's definitely the front runner, and that game's gonna be tough to beat, honestly, in general.
Yeah, and then Philadelphia going on the road to Atlanta. Jalen Hurts looking absolutely great. I mean, Philadelphia just taking it to Atlanta. Granted, Atlanta is not what they used to be, but still, anytime you can go get a 32-6 win, always a good sign there.
No, absolutely. You had a battle of the rookie coaches. Both teams bringing in new coaches there. Obviously, you had one veteran quarterback to one younger quarterback who obviously had playing time last year, but a lot of credit. And I am from right outside of Philadelphia, so I will say I'm an Eagles fan.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of fun there with the younger guys. And you see Devontae Smith. You had two rookies get their first career touchdowns in that opening game, and it was a lot of. It almost seemed like a college team. I don't know if you watched any of the game, but that's what it almost seemed like a college team at some points. Was just had a lot of fun energy from a rookie coach who, I think he's only 35, so
Yeah.
a very young coach. and then a young team on the offensive side. Defense is a little older, but like there's just a lot of young energy, and it just seemed almost like I was watching a college team. It was kind of fun in that way.
Yeah. But a game that was not fun for certain fans. Pittsburgh, Big Ben and company getting a rally. The defense mainly taking care of Buffalo, which is kind of what I expected to be the theme of that game, to be defense and a lot more defense. But I mean, Pittsburgh getting it done 23-16. I mean, you have the blocked punt, which goes for a touchdown. You had so many. It just kind of felt like all at once, here comes this big surge, and Buffalo couldn't handle it.
Exactly. It was almost like a tale of two games. It looked like Buffalo was never really not that they were in control, but it looked like it was Buffalo's game the whole time. They kind of were in control, and then you had that one weird play, and then you had the blocked punt, and all of a sudden, it seemed like Pittsburgh was dominating the whole game. It was literally just like a flip of a switch. It was like, okay, you dominate the first half, and then we'll take over the second half, and it was really just it almost looked like a flip of the switch.
Exactly. And then another kind of flick of the switch here. Minnesota goes to Cincinnati and loses in overtime. The Bengals get a win on opening day. I mean, this is a really fun game to see. I mean, Cincinnati looked very good for most of the game. I mean, granted, the Vikings are not what they once used to be either, but still, just to get a win for Joe Burrow and company, I mean, they looked very fun.
No, yeah, absolutely. That was a great win for Cincinnati. Again, a lot of younger receivers there on that team. And then, again, I'm not before anyone thinks so, I'm not picking them to win the AFC North or whatever. But that's a good win for that young quarterback and everything to kind of build confidence on throughout the season and kind of grow from there. Like rather than last year where you were struggling all year, this is a good way to start the year. I don't know, like you said, it's not the powerhouse Minnesota we saw 2-3 years ago or whatever, but it's a solid team still, especially that defense. You're able to put up the 27 points there, and I think it's a very, very, very good win for Cincinnati there, especially from where they were at last year.
And then one that was kind of not very entertaining until the end. San Francisco has a 41-17 lead. Detroit gets a touchdown and a 2, and then they recover an onside kick and get another touchdown and another 2-point conversion. And then San Francisco fumbles the ball. And then Jared Goff continues to march him down the field. You're 25 yards away from, getting a touchdown and 2-point conversion to tie this thing up. And Detroit just could not get it done. 41-33, the Niners win. This was one of those weird games. I mean, it seems like we always get one in week one,
right?
Where it's like, okay, this game should be over right now. I don't know what the Niners are doing. I don't understand why Kyle Shanahan and blowing leads seems to be a common thing. But, I mean, you're just lucky to win that one if you're San Francisco.
Absolutely. You're able to escape a road win. And I'll tell you what, San Francisco got a tough schedule. They got a couple road games there to start the year. And that's kind of tough there, especially when you're traveling back and forth from California or whatever. So you see how that plays a factor in a little bit. But the most important thing is to walk away with a win, especially in the NFL, because it's not like college where you got to worry about the rankings and everything. As long as you win, you go get that win under your belt, and you go 1-0 for the week, and you kind of move on. So San Francisco did what they had to do. I think everyone would expect it to be a little less scared, like less nervous reaction there, but a good way to kind of pull out that win.
And then speaking of the NFC West, Arizona just really the surprise of the day for me, not in the fact that they won, but in how they won.
Exactly.
A 38-13 just dismantling of the Titans. I mean, this was one of those games that, Arizona looked absolutely fantastic. Kyler Murray going off, DeAndre Hopkins going off, and Tennessee just looked like they did not have any answers.
No, which was very surprising. Everyone, you hear what they do in the offseason where you get a guy, you have a great receiving core now, A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, Corey Davis. You have Ryan Tannehill was coming off a fantastic year. I know I was expecting a lot more, and I know it's only game one, so we can see him go put up 50 points next week, but I was expecting more from that offense in week one. Like with guys I already mentioned, and then you also have Derrick Henry, so no joke at running back either. So I was expecting a little bit more there on the offensive end, but credit to Kyler Murray. I love watching that guy play. And he had 5 touchdowns thrown already, and I forget what point, but some point in the third quarter, and you kind of had that lead, so you kind of took things off a little bit. It seemed like, but I mean Arizona, I love watching that team as a whole, and I know I think I was on your preview show for the season, but honestly, Arizona's my pick to win the West this year. I love the way that team is on the offensive side of the ball and defense, and Kyler Murray's just playing, and the way he can kind of do both things, throw and run, mixed with that receiving core. I love what that team's kind of built out there.
Well, you're always welcome to come on tomorrow if you ever want to be on. And Seattle, kind of moving on to the next game here, the Seahawks. I mean, another tough team in the NFC West. They go on the road to Indy and get a 28-16 win over the Colts. I mean, just another solid win for the NFC West. That was to me kind of the theme of the day, is just the NFC West just racking up wins and the NFC North not really having a fun time.
No, not at all. And I think the NFC West is always a very good conference, very good division. And I think you saw
that.
It
might as well be the conference,
right?
It feels like this year.
But I think it really goes to show where this division is going to be, how tough this division will be. And you talk about it, like, these teams are beating the teams that are going to lead that other division, the AFC, in terms of the Colts and Tennessee Titans. You expect those two to battle it out for the division, I think. There, obviously, with Houston probably going to have a down year. Jacksonville still figuring things out there. So these Arizona Cardinals and Seattle Seahawks both went on the road. Not even at home. Both went on the road there and took care of business. And Seattle's always a weird team because especially they've kind of lost some of those names on the defensive side of the ball, but they're still playing high leverage defense, which is pretty cool to see there. But obviously, Russell, it's really going to be on that offensive line there for Seattle.
Say, anytime you got Russell Wilson, you're going to get a game.
Yeah.
I mean, Seattle's one of those teams that, like you said, they're always going to be good. It's just how good, you know.
Well, I mean, having the ability to throw to Lockett and Metcalf is just incredible. Yeah. I mean, many quarterbacks would kill to have one of them.
Yeah, and you get two of them. But speaking of teams that like to throw the ball, like Justin Herbert throwing for 337 on the football team's defense. I mean, this was a Washington defense that was highly touted. And, I mean, Justin Herbert did exactly what he had to do. Chargers get a 20-16 win.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, again, I wasn't surprised the Chargers found a way to win. It was kind of more how much they threw the ball and how much they were able to throw on that Washington defense, as you mentioned. Washington led for most of this game, too. I mean, I was following the score, and Chargers were just able to find a way to win at the end. But, hey, I'm not complaining as an NFC's guy. I'll take the division lead after week one.
And then one of the more fun storylines, I think, from week one, Sam Darnold and the Carolina Panthers. Sam Darnold getting to beat his former team in the Jets. Zach Wilson kind of off to a rough start that first half. He did not look that great. He adjusted in the second half, got the Jets in position to have a shot at winning, but Carolina holds on to a 19-14 victory.
Yeah, I think listen, I'm not saying Sam Darnold's no Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, but I think being out there with the Jets, I think that kind of hurt him a little bit. But now you throw him into that Carolina offense. Matt Rule's out there. He's been pretty good with some quarterbacks and obviously building things, and he's kind of taking over now. But you obviously have a fantastic running back in McCaffrey. But now you give him some weapons. I mean, you have DJ Moore, you have Robbie Anderson. They're no joke of receivers. I mean, they're a very solid two guys there. I think once things are said and done, Darnold can have a fairly good year there out there in Carolina.
Kind of funny mentioning Robbie Anderson, also a former Jet.
Exactly.
So you had the jet-to-jet connection for a touchdown against the Jets.
Yes, and I'm sure that kind of hurt him. I mean, let's see who the leading receiver there was.
Corey Davis.
Was Corey Davis left? I already said he was with Tennessee. I didn't realize he left the. Where'd he go? I don't even know. Did he go to the Jets or the Panthers?
Let's find out.
If he's with Carolina,
he's
that's
with the Jets.
Okay.
I was about to say.
I was gonna say if he's with the Panthers, that's a pretty good three there.
Yeah, but another kind of interesting one. Trevor Lawrence's debut. They go to Houston. Tyrod Taylor getting the start, and the Texans. Granted, it being Jacksonville, the Texans looked good, 37-21. This is a game that two teams I really don't think are going to be that great this year. not really at all. Just kind of the bottom of the AFC South. But I mean, a win is a win for Houston.
No, this is a win where you look at the end of the season standings. You'll look back and say, well, Texans won, so
Yeah,
Jacksonville will have the better draft pick.
exactly.
That's what you take away from this game.
Yeah,
But no, I thought Trevor Lawrence had some growing pains early, but I mean overall, I thought he played a pretty good game there, especially not. We just talked about teams and what their weapons they had. He doesn't have that luxury, and he's still able to put up over 300 yards. So overall, I thought Trevor Lawrence looked pretty good.
and then in my opinion, this was game of the week quality. I think this was
Absolutely.
the game of the week. Cleveland goes into Arrowhead and is just takes it to Kansas City the entire first half. It really did feel like, okay, this is the fifth quarter of the playoffs. You know, if you're Cleveland, this is where we ended the year. This is something even Tony Romo talked about, I think, where, this is where our season ended. We're right back here again. And it felt like Cleveland was gonna get they were gonna get the best of the Chiefs, but I mean, too many mistakes in the second half. You have the fumble by Nick Chubb. You have Gillian dropping the ball on a punt, and then by that point, the Chiefs had all the momentum in the world. And I mean, not that the Chiefs need that momentum anyway with Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and so much talent on that Chiefs offense. But hey, if being a Cleveland fan, looking at this game for me, they look pretty good. Now, obviously, you would have loved to get a win against, the defending conference champions, but this kind of going back to moral victories, this is a huge moral victory for Cleveland, in my opinion.
Yeah, you had the 29-20 lead there in the fourth quarter. You have that big play to Tyreek Hill. And I think, again, like you said, a good – man, I guess there's no always good loss in the NFL, but you were ahead most of that game or whatever and looked like you were going to pull it out for most part. But I think the one concerning thing here for Browns fans is the continued turnovers you see from Baker in the fourth quarter. I read a stat today. He has the most interceptions out of anybody in the second half, I think it was, or strictly in the fourth quarter, but I think in the second half as well since he's entered the league. So I think that's one thing he needs to figure out, or the team as a play calling has to figure out. I don't know whose side that kind of goes on there, but I think that is the one concerning thing for Cleveland is this kind of that or repetitiveness there in that kind of sense, and see if you're able to figure that out in some way. But overall, I thought it was a phenomenal game, and I mean that one. I don't know how much of the game you got to watch.
I was watching pretty much this entire game.
So
I was glued to this one.
I'm sure you saw that sack where Clowney and Garrett kind of
converged on Mahomes.
Completely crushed Mahomes.
That was one of those turning moments where it's just like, what in the – are we going to do that? As a Browns fan, I'm thinking, are we going to do this?
I think there was a third guy. I can't remember his name. I think there was a third guy even in the mix there, kind of coming on the front end of that.
Giant sack. There's just like, oh, my goodness. There we go.
I was waiting for one of them to pop out with the ball just because of how hard they hit him and stuff. I don't know how Mahomes held onto it.
I don't know either. But another really good one that kind of, I think, got overshadowed by Cleveland, Kansas City a bit. Miami getting the 1-point win in New England. This was not as offensive as that Cleveland, Kansas City game, but this is a very good battle, too, with Mac Jones and Tua Tagovailoa going at it. Two former Alabama quarterbacks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a very good road win for Miami to come away. Obviously, New England's a tough place to play. Obviously, they're not what they used to be. But still, for Miami to go in there, get a nice road win to start the year, especially after the year we saw them kind of have last year, where they started to really, really figure things out. This could be a Miami team to look out for, really, in that division. I mean, you have Buffalo lose early in the season there. You obviously have Miami beat New England, so that's a good win already there, an in-divisional win. Jets, we already talked about, are probably going to see a lot of struggling this year. So, really, this Miami team could be a team to look out for, not pull away, but to find a way to pull out the AFC East division.
Yeah. This is something I kind of mentioned with Connor in our NFL preview last week. I really think it is going to come down to Miami and Buffalo. Whoever wins that battle between those two is going to win the division.
And really, if we're being honest, I'll probably say they'll probably split. They'll probably split
I wouldn't be surprised.
The head-to-head. So it's going to come down to who wins the other division games.
Yeah. I mean, New England will be kind of that sleeper team, I guess you could say. That was another thing I mentioned, And here they are doing it week one, giving Miami a very big scare.
Absolutely. And I think this year's going to be a little bit of growing pains, but I do think Jones can be a good quarterback. So I think next year's the year to really kind of look out for New England to kind of challenge teams.
And then the real shocker of the day for me, New Orleans goes and just has a party in Jacksonville. Jameis Winston only throws for 148 yards, but 5 touchdowns, 38-3. They just destroy Green Bay.
Yeah,
Giant win for the Saints.
it was crazy to watch, and I think you saw some rust there for Aaron Rodgers. I know he won the MVP last year, but listen, we all know the deal between him and the Packers, and you had him sit out a lot of training camp, if not all of it, and then you had him not play one snap in preseason. So I mean, I really think you saw some rust from this team, or not team, but saw rust in Aaron Rodgers a little bit, and I don't think it's anything to be too scared of if I was a Packers fan. I mean, yeah, the blowout is, but I mean, listen, the Saints are the Saints. We've known their defense has kind of been on the uprise for a little bit, but the concerning part, if you're a Packers fan, to me at least, is the defense. I mean, Saints don't have Michael Thomas. They're obviously starting with Jameis Winston. We know what he's done in the past, and man, you allow 35 points in this game, or 38 points in this game. Like, to me, I get 3 points isn't a lot either, but the offense is going to figure it out. Aaron Rodgers will be fine. You still got you had Devontae Adams back. You still have you signed Randall Cobb to come back. You still have Aaron Jones at running. Like, the offense is going to be fine. They'll figure it out. To me, the concerning part here was the defense.
Exactly. I think this is one of those games that just I really don't know what to think of it because, I mean, that's not the Green Bay. This will be one of those games where you look at it at the end of the year and be like, huh, remember when we did that? Yeah, that was interesting. Look how much of a team. Look how much we've grown as a team since that game.
What was it last year when the Saints and Buccaneers, I think, opened up the year or opened up the first week, maybe not the first game of the year, and the Saints blew out Tampa Bay.
Yeah,
the Breeze Brady, and Tampa Bay goes and win the Super Bowl.
Exactly. And then, speaking of two teams that probably are not going to be in the Super Bowl, Denver defeats the Giants 27-13. This is one of those kind of draft position games in Week 1. Denver might put something together with Teddy Bridgewater. I don't know. But, I mean, I still do not have that much faith in the Giants.
No, and I think, honestly, and might be the difference in, like, kind of where we are in terms of geography there, like with me being from the northern part. But there is a lot of hype on that New York train about the Giants this year with another year of Daniel Jones. They got some offensive weapons. They kind of built, I forget who it was, they got an offensive line, though, and they built a good defense. To me, kind of hearing all that and stuff, and I would say coming into the year, they weren't going to challenge for the division title. But to me, from all the hype I was hearing from Giants fans and stuff, this was one, kind of funny, and two, going off that, this is probably one of the more disappointing losses out of teams this week, I think, out of Week 1. To lose by 14 at home to Denver, just because, like what you mentioned, like, I don't have high expectations for Denver either. So this was a game, especially if you're a Giants fan, you think you'd be able to find a way to come out with a win, but you lose by 14 points. And for all the talk about the offense, you have Barkley back, you had Jones again, and some receivers this year. You only put up 13 points at home. So to me, this is one of the more disappointing losses for NFL teams or NFL fans. If you're a Giants fan, because I don't know where you would kind of go with that, with who was the most disappointing loss this week, but I almost lean toward that.
I would have to say Tennessee's the most disappointing for me, just because that was not. I expected them to put some points on the board. You have, like you mentioned, such talent around you. I mean, Tannehill, Henry, you have great wide receivers. You got Julio Jones, stuff like that, and you only get 13. To me, that's got to be the most disappointing one. I would think honorable mention should obviously go to Cleveland for, having a 29-20 lead.
That's fair.
Letting it slip away on, of all things, a fumbled punt. I mean, that feels like a Cleveland tradition at this point. Finding the weirdest ways to lose games.
No question.
There's been something they've been doing for a long time. But one more game to get to, the Sunday night game. The Rams just take it to the Bears. I mean, this is kind of what I expected to see. I mean, the Rams, you got Matt Stafford now. He throws for 321. I mean, this was just the Rams look good too, going back to the NFC West.
No, Rams are another team to look out for. I really think I think it's going to be the Rams and Cardinals down the stretch for that division. And both those teams can do damage in the playoffs too. I really believe that. I think, obviously, Stafford going over from Detroit He's got a lot more weapons out there in LA now. He's got a defense to work with. This is what a lot of Matt Stafford fans and people who have been defending Stafford for his entire career, this is what they've wanted for a long time, was him to go to a team like this. And that first week, I mean, listen, that Bears team might not be anything special, but the defense is usually pretty good. And they dropped 34 on them. But can we just say this? How long are we going to watch Andy Dalton for? Like, when can we just skip to the Justin Fields experiment? I don't know if you're with me on that, but like,
let's see here. Until I don't know, probably mid-season.
You think? Okay, you think it's gonna be that long? I don't know.
I feel like knowing how the Bears are, it feels like it should be something that should be corrected like in 2 weeks, but it won't be because Chicago is not the best at decision making.
You're not wrong, and I got nothing against it. Like, I think he's a decent quarterback and a solid backup, whatever.
Exactly.
But like, we've seen him in
He's
Cincinnati.
a good guy. He's just not the guy.
Yeah, we've seen him in Cincinnati for the longest time. We saw him take over for Dallas when Dak got hurt.
Yeah.
Like, you know what you're getting out of Andy Dalton, and I don't know. I kind of, as a neutral fan there, I just want to see Justin Fields play and kind of start that young group.
Exactly. Hey, as long as it's not Trubisky, I'm sure Bears fans will be happy for a little bit.
Right?
Well, maybe not too.
We'll see how long that takes.
Yeah, they might have turned already for all I know, you know. But final game to get to, starting in 2 minutes actually. Baltimore at Las Vegas, Monday Night Football on ESPN and ABC tonight. So good to see ABC getting Monday night games again. Just real quick before we wrap this up here, who do you got winning that game?
This is going to be a really good game. I really think this will compete for the game of the week with Cleveland and Kansas City and Dallas, Tampa Bay. I really think it could be that good. I know a lot of people aren't high on the Raiders, but I think Carr isn't a bad quarterback. I think he's got some weapons out there now. I think Waller really took a step up last year. And then Lamar Jackson's obviously no joke. So I think this game is going to be a little bit of a shootout. And I think I'm going to take Raiders edge out the Ravens.
Really? All righty then. Well, I'm glad to have a bold opinion on this one. Because for me, it's going to – I think it's Baltimore. I think this is just going to be a little bit too much of Lamar Jackson and all that. You know what he can do, but he can still just run right by you. It's one of those things, you know what's coming. Everyone's seen him by this point, but I mean, they're just so talented. Not to say the Raiders aren't talented, obviously. Yeah. They are. But I just think Baltimore edges this one out.
Well, Lamar Jackson better be ready to run because they don't have any running backs. So
yeah, he is the running back. They can just play 10 people on the field. How
about that? Before the first snap of the regular season, you already lose 3 running backs.
I know.
From Justice Hill, from Gus Edwards, and I'm missing their main guy.
Oh, I'm trying to think who is there. I mean,
because I forget who the main guy was. Edwards was second, and then Justice Hill was third. But
I mean,
I feel stupid right now. But
yeah, I mean, well, that's how that works sometimes. You know, that's the power of being live when doing this. Right? You know, but I mean, I think that just says as much of a how good Baltimore is that. They can have 3 running backs down and still be, a favorite to win the division in a way.
Absolutely. It's crazy. And listen, it's going to be weird, but that 17th game, I will say, I think it will do a lot for teams and kind of chasing things down.
I think so. Yeah, it'll be, as a fan, I'm happy we get an extra week, but I can absolutely see where players are like, why?
Yeah, for us, we get to watch an extra game, but for the players, it makes 0 sense. Like, what is that? It was a money grab, obviously, and that's why I did it. But for the players, that game makes absolutely 0 sense.
It really makes exactly. It's just one of those. Yay! I'm glad I get an extra week, but at the same time, I feel so bad for them because what if someone gets injured on that extra week? Really important, Now you gotta train yourself for an extra week of football you didn't have to, and I mean. I just don't know how you go through that thought process of your kind of your internal body clock thinking, okay, the season's over. No, you got 1 more week to go. It isn't over yet.
Exactly.
You got to kind of retrain your mind to do all that. And, some people are going to look and be like, that's 1 more week. But, I mean, what if you had to do something 1 more week than you thought? You would probably be like, I don't want to do this. But, I mean, such a fun week of football to start it. We're almost done with it. Week 2 coming up. We'll get some great matchups there. Not going to go into that tonight. That's what next show is for. You're more than welcome to join us tomorrow, Andrew. We'd be happy to have you. But I believe that is going to be a wrap for us today. Baltimore and Vegas should be kicking off momentarily. If it hasn't already, it will in a few moments. So, for Andrew Santangelo, I'm Cade Kennedy, and have a great night, everybody.